size waterbed. Fill it up and it takes like 3 or 4 days to get it up to temperature. Man. That was rough when you moved and had to redo it. And those bed frames are always heavy. I don't think so. Not that I know of.
I guess with the drought, we'd have to empty it.
Yeah. I know. It's gonna be a sticky one. They do? Wow.
I had to work last week. I had to do one day in Bakersfield. But just at this palace place, like it was a show.
The Cow Palace?
No, this was the casino.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I know exactly where you're at.
It was
Right off the 99.
This was actually living out. It's right across from Dryers.
Oh,
Yeah. It was miserable.
Nobody stands.
And I'll come up with this.
Yeah, I know exactly where it is.
Between the two of us, we should be able to remember this.
So we were doing, a show for the AV distributor that we're opening up or taking on stuff. And they had like people in this room where they had this vents like coming down.
Right,
And that's where the air was. Well, like we were all set, like,
outside of that.
yeah, outside the zone. And I was like, I was doing this presentation, it's like 12 groups. Sweating, this is the most hot, miserable place I've ever been in my life.
Bakersfield isn't always, it isn't that it's always hot, it's very heavy, because we call it tooling. Because you have all those farms around there, and all that water's there. If it's 105 and you got humidity, it is, and it was 105 today, it is a miserable place to be.
I learned I'm never moving to Bakersfield.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Okay.
I was driving through one time and I had to count. And it's like I get to northern Bakersfield and all of a sudden they call it, like certain snow areas are white out, they had brown out.
Oh,
There's
for
so
the
much wind.
wind
it's
and
just
dirt.
Dirt.
Yep.
You couldn't even see.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I thought about. I heard like they were talking about the church camp there. I was like, oh my gosh.
That's what I said.
Miserable.
Yeah, church camp in Bakersfield down the valley would be, if it's at Fraser Park, that's one thing. If it's
I
in
don't
the
know,
valley,
how could it be any worse than Marina Valley? Temperature.
It's.
oh, it's heavy. It's way, the humidity's way worse there.
Because it's heavy.
You have everything underneath the sun there. You got cotton, you got onions, you got carrots. They're always watering
I might be
something.
a bad judge just the place I was in, like here, just was horrible.
No. 10 years. Trust me. 10
And that's
years.
the other thing I said to myself. I said, how does Rick live out here in this heat?
I didn't live there. I had to work there. I lived up in Tehachapi, which is 30 to 40 degrees cooler, which was nice. Heavenly Highway, page 92. I heard an old story, how a Savior came from glory, how he gave his life on Calvary to save a wretch like me. I heard about his groaning, of his precious blood's atoning. Then I repented of my sins and won the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all my love is to him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about his healing, of his cleansing power revealing, how he made the lame to walk again, and caused the blind to see. And then I cried, dear Jesus, come and heal my broken spirit. And somehow Jesus came and brought to
Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all my love is to him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about a mansion he has built for me in glory, and I heard about the streets of gold beyond the crystal sea, about the angels singing and the old redemption story. And some sweet day I'll sing up there the song of victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with his redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew him, and all my love is to him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood.
Good evening, everybody. We'll see. I'll let you know. Yeah, I was thinking about the guy back here. He's gone. Someone's coming. Okay. We'll bring it in here and then we'll have it there for next time I forget to turn the AC on. Yeah, I didn't get the AC on until about 20 minutes before 7. So I haven't had enough time to kick in, and so it's hot. And it's not as hot as it was, but I mean, the longer you're in here, the more it starts feeling like a sauna. So we'll see. I mean, now at least everyone that's tuning in knows if I pass out why, simply because it's like 100 degrees in here. I think it's like 90 or high 80s, but still it feels like 100. We're gonna go into prayer requests. Again, last week we changed it so we don't stand on the last verse. We'll just go into prayer requests, then we'll stand if there are whether if there are not any prayer requests, and then we'll have prayer then. Let me do this. I'm going to look up something real quick. So as it stands, and it's not very official. I think it's probable, and who knows? As of like Sunday, I hadn't heard that San Dimas voted to have it last Wednesday, because I guess I was going to blame my family, but it's not like I talk to them every day anyway. So in any case, San Dimas is going to have it. We talked about the possibility of dates, but Ryan texted me, and I think it's still just something that they're looking at is the end of September and the beginning of October. So September 31st and October 1st will be the dates. Yeah, we were thinking like August 5 and 6, but they're looking to maybe they're looking maybe to move it back to give them more time to prepare. I know that was one of the things holding them back from taking the meeting, is they had some work around the property they wanted to do. And now that the property is officially theirs, they get to do all this work, and they're excited to host a meeting now that the building's theirs, but they want to get some work done. I think this gives them time to do that. But I think probably even more importantly is give them time to kind of flesh out some ideas and make sure that, we're not just going through the motions of the meeting, but that we have the topics in place, the speakers in place, and giving the people that will be speaking plenty of time. It might be something similar like last time, kind of something I've been hearing downwind where they break everybody up, but that all remains to be seen. So we'll find out. So as far as this is not a cleaning week, so that's really the only announcement I have. Prayer request wise, obviously, we need to keep praying for Dave and Barbara. They just have doctor's appointments, and I think Barbara's was today and Dave's is tomorrow, or getting backwards, but I think it was that way. And obviously there's a lot of recovering to do there. So we're praying for them. And Sharon fell on Sunday and banged her other knee. So the one she's been struggling with is her right knee. It's the one that she's been getting physical therapy for. But she has, coming out of her living room, she has 2 tiny little steps, and the floor is tile, and she was going up the second step. Her sandal, I think it was a sandal, but her shoe grabbed the lip of the step, and she went down on her left knee, and she was really banged up there. It's pretty swollen, at least when I saw it. It was pretty swollen, and I know Treva, you probably saw it after me, so it was probably even more swollen by the time that you've been there. But she's having a really hard time getting around, and so she's keeping her leg up, and she's keeping it iced. Patty is still struggling with her cough, and so I haven't spoken with her about it, but Sharon was telling me that she spoke with Patty and that most likely she wouldn't be here tonight because she's still not feeling well. I know Julie's still recovering, so a lot of things still recovering from, a lot of ongoing physical things, whether it's multiple shoulders in the church or now, knees and illnesses. We've got a lot going on, and we want to be praying for each other. And as I said Sunday, I'm very open. And I think it's biblical. We talked about this for people to want to be prayed over. And we look at it as some like thing that would be Pentecostal, and it's not. It's biblical. We're not talking about rise up and walk. We're talking about people who have sickness, who want people to pray over them. And it's we do that. Sometimes we call it a season of prayer. It's a similar thing. We can do that, or we can literally have someone take the altar and pray over it. And I think that's something that I'd like to see everyone that's going through something consider. And again, just to go through the motions, like, hey, I have this thing, I want to start doing this. But if you feel like you want the church to pray, not just for you, but with you, over you, then I'm not going to go to people and say, hey, we want to have an altar call for your sickness or for your ailment, or for you to get better. I think what might be a good idea is, if we can get everybody here, is to just have an altar call for all the physical needs, and just, that way not one person has to stand up and say, yeah, mine is the one that we need to have a season of prayer for, which again, that's fine if you want to do that. I don't think it's about you saying it's your worth. I think it's just a good desire. Maybe we'll consider when everyone's here, when we can get everybody here, have a good season of prayer over all the sickness. Maybe we'll do it even if we can't. We'll do that. I'll think about it. Maybe we'll do that on Sunday. So prayer request wise, just a lot of ongoing sicknesses. Caden has a scope tomorrow. We're really hoping that comes back with some information. We want, I think my opinion is, we want to find out that the gluten is a problem, and so that we can start kind of just locking down a permanent diet. But whatever God's, plan, or whatever it is, we just want to, hoping to get some answers tomorrow. Speaking of Caden, his old school just will not stop calling me and Stephanie, like even right now. They're wanting to have us do something, but he's not even enrolled there anymore. So with that being said, are there any prayer requests on your hearts, Treva?
I remember my sister Ramona and her husband Vic and his mom, they were just out there visiting, and she tested positive for COVID. She's 82. I think she has to look at asthma. So she definitely got cough and that, but you can't take her to the hospital or to the doctor for an appointment because she has COVID.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. Ramona and Vic both come back with coughs, but they said they don't have any other symptoms. They tested negative, so just keep them.
Well, hopefully they don't have COVID. So let's remember this in our prayers. Anybody else? Okay, then yeah, we're down quite a few people. I don't know I don't know where everybody is. I know a couple of them aren't feeling well, some are out of town. So but just remember those that aren't here. And I know I've brought this up a couple times lately. We have a lot of things going on that are keeping people from being here. And I don't want to overreact, but again, our attendance has been very poor the last couple months. And so it's probably just one of those things. It's seasonal, a lot of sickness, but I think there's a lot of serious sickness going around, a lot of COVID going around. But we have to keep in mind, and you look around and you see constantly half the church gone or more than that on Wednesdays, almost no one here on Wednesdays. On Sundays, hitting 2/3 our members constantly. We got to stop and look inward and see, where we might, our attendance might be lacking. So we're going to look at some things tonight. This is, I think we'd probably credit Eric with the idea. In the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at different things, and I'm pretty sure it all stems from something Eric talked about last time he was teaching. I think this is when he talked about maybe teaching on names of the Bible, people that are unnamed. It's been a while. But so I kind of throwing around the idea. I really like the idea. Eric wasn't something he wanted to do. He was like, I'll wait and let someone else do it. Oh, we didn't stand and pray. Let's go ahead and stand, and then I'll pick up where I just left off. So we're gonna have to learn this new system where we don't stand, we do prayer requests, and we do stand and pray. With that, Eric, will you go ahead and lead us in prayer, please?
Most kind and gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity tonight to come into your house. Lord, we just come with you with heavy heart, just do with all the prayer requests, the ones that are mentioned, the ones aren't mentioned. Continue to be over this church and guide us and help us and be supportive. Lord, we ask this in Son's name.
Amen. And along those lines, and just thinking about it, you guys know how I work. I'm very open book minded. I've had to learn over the years to keep my mouth shut, and not that I want to run my mouth about other people, but sometimes I'm very open about how I feel about things. If I feel like I'm right, or if I feel like it's, unless I feel like it's something that's damaging or harmful, I'm pretty open with the way I feel about things. And so again, if I see attendance down, I'm going to say it. If I feel that way, I'm just going to point it out, though I'm not pointing at any one member. Considering that, and this is something that I don't want to say bothers me, but something that's concerning to me, and I'll just say it because that's what I've been feeling lately, and I want to be open as a pastor, because I'm not of the mind to be going through motions. I'm not the kind of pastor that I'm studying to come up with a sermon that you think is good enough, right? And then, or that I think is good enough, so that we just kind of go through the routine of things. And I know that not every sermon is going to hit, and some have different things, and it's probably a big part of it would probably be me. But as I identified, like, I don't think my sermons are really hitting home. I don't feel like people are being moved. So then I do something different, or I study different, or I preach different. And I've been trying different things the last couple months. And around the same time, our attendance has been lacking. I just feel like my sermons they're just not they're being heard. Everyone's attention is there. But as a pastor, I've been doing this a long time. I know when people are being impacted, and that's the best word I could use, being impacted by the message. And I'm trying, and I could probably do better, but I don't know. I just don't like to, I don't want to put the blame on me, because that's taken away from God and the importance that he plays in the message. We have people that are, we've been moved by people, I think, that are, whose sermons are less engaging than mine, or less interesting. And I'm not saying mine are, I'm just saying that I've sat through many boring sermons. I don't think mine are that boring. And yet I've seen the Spirit move and people be saved. So we can't say it's just the preacher. So I want to say this, and I'll probably be saying more on it. If I keep feeling like my Sunday sermons especially are just falling flat, and I'm earnestly trying to figure out what I might be doing wrong, I'm going to say something, because that's how I am. I'm not going to just go over to the church and be like, what am I doing? What's wrong with them? What's wrong with me? That's not how I function. If I've got concerns, I'm going to voice my concerns, and then we can deal with them openly. And I don't feel like, I'm not even close to thinking this, but I'm not going to say I haven't thought it. Is my time at Mount Vernon, like, sometimes you hit like a 5-year mark where people's their style just doesn't hit home, and I have to stop and consider, I'm not saying I'm considering leaving. I'm just saying I look inward, but rather than just beat myself up, I want to just throw it out there and maybe for the church to consider, if it is something that you feel the same way, you're allowed to think that. Yeah, the services, without pointing a finger at you, Brother Nick, have been a little bit flat. And so maybe we can consider what we could do differently, or if the church wants to, whatever, have go through a time of prayer and fasting. I think we're at a very important time that we're not lukewarm right now, because some stuff is coming and we need to be in a good place as a church. We've got the midterms coming up, and we know chaos will happen right before it. We're gonna have a lot of chaos in our country with inflation and prices and everything and food shortages. We don't know what kind of year we might have. And so I want to see us doing great if we're going into some time of hardship. And it's not so much, maybe that's more than anything. I don't think we're doing anything wrong. Everyone's attention is there. Maybe it's me feeling like we need to be, including myself, we need to be more on fire and more actively involved and invested in our, mind and our heart, not just our attendance, but our mind and our heart, and being ready for what's ahead. So maybe that's probably it more than anything. I'm convicted about where we need to be, and not so much the issue with where we are, because I don't think we're in a bad place. With that said, I'm also not someone to wait until we're hurting until I'm going to say something. If I feel like, hey, we could be doing more as a church, or more involved, invested, that's probably a better word, invested in our hearts and mind, then there's that. And I'm not talking specifically about anybody. So that's it. No, we're done with this. Let's move on. Eric was talking a while back about names and nameless people, and I got thinking about names, and maybe this was partly inspired by that. And so the last couple of weeks, we've talked about names. We talked about people whose names were changed and reasons for that. And so some were changed, some were added to. Last week, we talked about names that God gave, and we focused on the ones that he gave to certain people, and spent some time talking about their names and the reasons why God probably named them the name he did. So names have meanings. This is what we've been covering. Names have meanings. Some were given, some were changed. Again, that's what we've been going over. God gives names, God changes names. And then, of course, the first Wednesday, we talked about how our names, we'll get new names. I don't know if it's changing is the right word. It's all things will be new. It will be fresh start, new names given by God. And as I point out, when we talk about that new name, it will be meaningful. It's not going to be Bob, it's going to be meaningful. It's going to bear weight as to our existence and who we are. And so a reflection of our character will be revealed, a percentage of our life and how we lived will be revealed through the name, I think, that God gives. We're known, and I briefly talked about this last week, we're known by our reputation. So we don't really care so much about names in our culture, but we do care about reputation. As God's people, I talked about this briefly going into last week. What people think and say about you is important. If we're hated because of Christ, that's okay. But if we're hated because we're untrustworthy, that's a problem as God's people. And so our reputation, we want to be known for our works. We'll talk about that right now. Our reputation goes in hand with this, but I want to introduce tonight's thoughts. Yes, there are people that are unnamed in the Bible. And as you look at it, there's more than we could ever cover. So I broke them down into just a few groups tonight. And then we'll probably do this at least one more time, because there's so many people who aren't named. I've got 3 groups that I want to cover tonight of people who aren't named, but named but they're known. So what are they known by? They're known by their works. They're known by their fruits. And so we've got Gentiles that were praised by God, 2 of my favorite people in the Bible. I've talked about them. Gentiles who helped Hebrews. This is Old Testament stories, just a couple of them that were unnamed, but very instrumental in preserving God's people and their part at doing the work of God. And then I've got 4 widows here. One we may not go over, 4 widows in the Bible. And I think that's worth noting for the fact that, a widow is someone that you might think is God's done using. And yet we see God still working in and through widows, and 4 widows. And so God works through Gentiles. So we're going to talk about two groups, widows and Gentiles, things that we might not look to God to use and work through, but God does. And God is able to work through the low, the weak, the poor, and those without. God is able to work with anyone. And so it's a powerful thing when these Gentiles and these widows are known, even though we don't know them by name. So let's look at Matthew chapter 7 to introduce this. And I know I'm not going to get through all this, so it's okay. We'll probably have to do the widows next week, unless I can move through these stories. My intention is not to so much teach the stories, but to look at how they're known. So we do not identify them by name. We identify them by their fruits, and that's what Matthew 7, how we're going to introduce this. Matthew 7, verse 15. Speaking of false prophets, but there's still, the idea of knowing by fruits is the point I want to gain from this. Verse 15, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Grapes are not gathered from those thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? Are they? I should probably read it not like a robot. So every good tree bears good fruit, and every bad tree bears bad fruit. Good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor can a bad tree produce good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then you will know them by their fruits. This is how people are known, and it's specifically talking about false prophets, but it's also how we identify true prophets or certain individuals. We know them because the things that they do reveal who they are. And so there are many things that speak to this. And Sunday, I talked so much about that, and 2 Sundays ago about it's not I will, it's Christ that does the work. And I acknowledge that we play a part. As I said, we submit, but with that life we submit unto God, he does things with. And we praise God for our faithfulness. And yeah, every time you come to church, you choose to get up out of bed, and you choose to put on your shoes and get dressed. I don't know why I specifically pointed out shoes. You put a lot of things on and you do a lot of things to get ready, some more than others. And so you come to church, you did that, you made that choice. But certainly the idea is it's not an attitude of I am faithful, I've been faithful, I witnessed here, I did that. It's all giving God glory and credit for all of it. And I think that's important for us to do. But we can't ignore the fact that there are works that are performed through us. And I want to say it's to his credit. It's the point of 2 weeks ago, and it's stand behind everything I said. It's to God's glory and credit. Every good thing, every bit of faithfulness that you have and are and have been, every part of truth that you've gained from God, every time you've witnessed and shed the light of Christ into someone else's life, praise God for that and give him the glory and the credit. Point to him, not inward. But we play a part in bearing fruit through submitting unto God. And that's where we closed the sermon out a couple weeks ago. We submit unto God. Our part is we bow down and submit our life unto him. Our job is to thank him. And part of that is fruits, and we praise him, and that is fruits. And so our lives should be bearing fruits. A Christian's life should bear fruits. And I think at the end of it all, it's by your fruits, the things you've done as a Christian, as a child of God, that you will be known not only by God for and by, but known in heaven for. And I think these are things that will all translate over into our existence, into eternity. We will be known by our works, not your name, not your hair color, the color of your skin, not by your beauty, but by the deeds you did in the name of Christ, the way that you allowed. And this is how I like to look at it. The way that you allowed and let God work through you. It's God doing the work, but we just need to submit into it and let God bear fruit in our life and outward to others. And so, yes, we are known by our fruits. We are known by our deeds, and on earth and in heaven. And today we are going to acknowledge 8 people, 7 people, how many we can get to, 6 people that we don't know their name, but the same way that they're known, we are known in heaven. It's not about our name. It's about people seeing God work through us and the things we do for him. 2 stories I want to start off with is Matthew chapter 8. And it's a story. It's a story. I love these 2 stories. I really, really love these Gentiles that it's because, yes, they're Gentiles, but because they were praised by God. And it always stands out to me in the way that God looked at those in whom had excuse not to be faithful or have faith and trust in God, but they did. And it just goes to show, there is no excuse. Even the Gentiles in the life of Christ, there were Gentiles that understood God and had the faith that Christ wished his people had. And so he pointed that out. Verse 5 of chapter 8. That's a whole nother story. Group that we may cover next week. If again, I've got a lot of people written down, and then I thought, okay, let me group some up here and we'll go based on some themes. But one of the big groups is lepers. There's a big group of lepers, not known by name, but great stories there. So we will probably look at some lepers next week. We'll see. That's my penciled in plan. Verse 5, and when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, imploring him and said, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, formerly tormented. Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion said, Lord, I am not worthy for you to come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. And this is amazing faith. Every part of this, every part of this. Well, let's read verse 9 because it furthers that thought. For I am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and he does it. And so he's acknowledging some things about who Christ is, one that has authority over all things. He's using his authority as an example. I understand that the things I have authority over, I command and they do. When I tell my servant to do it, he does it. When someone that's under me is told to do this, he does this. Or that, he does that. Acknowledging that Christ has authority all over all things. I'm unworthy for you to come under my roof. A whole nother thing to acknowledge about this man, his humility. And then he acknowledges Christ as the one whom has authority over all things, that all he has to do with that authority is speak and it's done. Like, I'm a man of authority. I speak and it's done. But he understands the limit of his authority, the centurion. But with Christ, who has authority over all things, he not only has the authority to order and command, but to command that one be healed and to command all things. And so what faith that all Christ had to do, all the things that people were looking for Christ to do to prove himself and show a sign and do that, this, that, and the other. And the man of faith just said, just speak the words and I know it will be done because I know who you are. And when Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who were following, truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and recline at the table of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, but the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said to the centurion, go, it shall be done for you as you have believed. And the servant was healed that very moment. And acknowledging the part that the Gentiles would have being brought in through the church, the part of the Jews who were part of God's people being put out, being cut down, and they would have their part outside due to lack of faith. But again, we read through the rest of the story because I wanted to read the answer to this man's desire. God healed. But the true verse that stands out to me is this compliment, verse 10. Truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. And this is why we've talked about him in the past. When I just think about hearing compliments, every time I read these verses or these two stories we're reading right now, when you consider what that must feel like, who doesn't like being praised in some way, just being acknowledged? And I'm always very leery about seeking after praise, certainly also about giving it, because we want the praise of God, and I don't ever want to take away from that. But ultimately, this is what we're looking for, is the praise of God. That's why we are faithful. That's why we do the things we do, because we want to hear the words, well done, my good and faithful servant. We want to hear the praise of the one who matters most, and not just matters most, but matters infinitely more than any other. To hear the Lord himself say, what great faith. I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel. And so you wonder, we don't know this man's name, but what name will he be given? considering what he's known for, what great faith, and how his name might somehow resemble the faith that Jesus Christ not only acknowledges, but praises, or I shouldn't say praises, but he, elevates, he acknowledges in the eyes of everyone else, like what great faith this man has. So a nameless centurion, and yet he's known for his faith. And so the other story that stands out, again, similar in my mind, is Matthew 15. I've in the past referred to them together. I don't know how many times. They just are two stories that stand out together because of the complement. We have the Canaanite woman, the Syrophoenician woman, the way that sometimes just the Gentile woman, there's different words and expressions for her, but all ways of pointing out that she was not an Israelite. Matthew chapter 15, verse 21, Jesus sent her from there and withdrew into the district of Tyre and Sidon. And the Canaanite woman from that region came out and began to cry out, saying, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is cruelly demon-possessed." But he did not answer her a word. And his disciples came and implored him, saying, "Send her away, because she keeps shouting at us." And he answered and said, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." She came and began to bow down before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered and said, "It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she said, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs feed on the crumbs which fall from the master's table." And then Jesus said to her, "O woman, your faith is great. It shall be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed at once. And so, and I've talked about this in the past, certainly an attitude that wouldn't be uncommon for an Israelite to have towards a Gentile. And I'm not adamant about my belief in this. I think, at least my take is that Christ does come across as pretty harsh here. But it was an attitude of an Israelite to a Gentile that would be typical. However, I think this was all in her best interest in order for her faith to be revealed, her humility to be revealed. And at the end of it all, this might seem like a difficulty or a harsh thing. And the world might look at the things that Christ allows us, that God allows us to go through, as being a harsh thing. If you have such a loving God, why does he let us go through these things? And it's like, well, that's a short-sighted way of looking at the outcome. God allows us to go through things because he knows that through faith, that there's an outcome better than having not gone through it. So going through something that one might deem as harsh, if we're a faithful person and we love God, and yet he lets your child get sick, or he lets you go through this, and he lets your wife die. And it's like, how is that a loving God? Well, I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, right? There's a lot more complexities and interworking parts about God's will and plan and letting things happen and doing things, and how this all fits together. These are things that in our limited capacity we'll never fully understand. So all that aside, just directly looking at the attitude or idea that God, the cruelty that God must have to allow people to go through things, or in this case, he said these things to her, but I think it's all to allow for her faith to shine, because there's much more value in a faithful work or a faithful individual than going through any short temporary hardship. And we just put so much weight to things that really, at the end of the day, don't. We're all going through a bunch of stuff, a lot of illness, a lot of hardship, a lot of doctor's visits for everybody in the last couple months, But let's let our faith shine through, let's let God see our faith, and let's keep the attitude, and let's be faithful. But it's pretty harsh things that he said about her. There's food for the people at my children at my table, not for the dogs. And then she acknowledges that, yeah, I'm just a dog at your table, but even the dogs eat whatever falls off. She's acknowledging her position, but she's also acknowledging that this request that she's making, though great, impossible with man, that for God, it's a crumb. So she's acting in a way of humility, like the centurion. Don't even come to my house. I'm unworthy. I'm just a dog at your table. But I know the authority in which you wield, that only but a crumb from your table is able to do that which I am asking of you. I know who I am to you, Lord, but all I need is a crumb. And of course, these are very similar stories, very similar responses by them, very similar responses by Jesus. Yes, verse 28, then Jesus said to her, "Oh woman, your faith is great." What do you say about the centurion? Faith that is greater than all that are in Israel. And so I don't know what their names will be in glory, and even where they stand if they'll be in glory. I know that these stories, great fruits, powerful. To this day, they're still impacting people. These stories are preached every day, every Sunday. These stories are being heard all over the world. And so, no, they're not known by their name, but they're known by their fruits. And they're known in heaven by their deeds. And so one day, they'll probably be lifted up in glory for these things, and as well as other things. But again, that's me jumping. I don't know. I'm assuming that the faith that they show us in these stories were probably something that governed them in their life. Let's look at a couple of the Gentiles. Keep moving at a decent speed. There's some people in the Old Testament that stand out. Genesis chapter 40. I'm kind of been questioning about how much to read of this. I don't want us to just remember the stories, but we can't just remember stories. I read these things recently in preparation for this, but some of us, we may not have read these stories in a long time. I don't want to just refer to them, but I don't want to read the whole story. Let's read Genesis 40. We'll pick up in verse 1. We'll skip some of these verses I've written down, but I think we can read these verses in 40, and then we'll jump to chapter 41. Story about a couple individuals, one in particular. He's referred to as a cupbearer. That's all he's known as. And yet he plays a part in the preservation in all of God's people. We don't know his name, and I don't know if he has a part in glory. Again, I don't know. But what I do know is that we don't know him by name, but we know his fruit, and God used him in a mighty way. There's some points I want to make, but I'll probably miss them if I don't make them now. I think I don't know what people do. I think it's an easy thing for us to probably tend to assume what we're capable of doing and jump to conclusions like, who am I? I'm only this, I'm only that. These two stories that we just read, these were just a centurion with a little authority and a woman who considered herself a dog to Christ. Who were they? And yet today, their stories are impacting people's life. This man is just a cupbearer thrown in prison wrongly, but through him, God would bring about a feat of preserving his entire people through. And so rather than looking and weighing ourselves out and what we're capable of doing by our worth and who we are, we recognize God can use these people that we're reading about. God can use you to do powerful things. It's not about our worth, our abilities, our names. It's about what God can do with us. And of course, with a willing, humble, submissive vessel, we see that God is able to kill giants, overthrow nations, and ultimately overcome sin and death and inherit a kingdom that is being built up for Christ himself. So what is Christ able to do? What is God able to do with us, with you? Regardless of your age or your experience, anything, God can do all things through him. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Verse 1, chapter 40. Then it came about after these things, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, and the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was furious with the two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard in the jail in the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. The captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them. This is after Joseph had already been lied about and thrown in prison And then now he's been elevated again as like the right-hand man of a prison guard captain. And the captain of the bodyguard put Joseph, verse 4, in charge of them, and he took care of them. They were in confinement for some time. And then the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in jail, both had a dream the same night, each man his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, they were dejected. He asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house, why are your faces so sad? Then they said to him, we have had a dream. There was no one to interpret it. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please. And he goes on to tell them each dream, two different judgments. One would be forgiven. One would be put to death. But I think we kind of see a little bit of that in as the cupbearer is telling his story to Pharaoh. So let's skip forward to chapter 41. Now Pharaoh has a dream, and there's no one in the land that can interpret his dream. An important dream, again, to the preservation of a lot of people. So he has all these people, and I'm sure the cupbearer who had been forgiven at this time, been forgiven for a while, kind of forgot about Joseph for a while. But then this cupbearer hears all these the dream, because Pharaoh's telling it to these different men, looking for their interpretation. No one could give an interpretation. So finally, the cupbearer's like, oh yeah, I know a guy, which, thanks. Actually, I do find great value in referrals. And it's like, I don't like a lot of going into places without knowing what I'm getting into. I don't like going to a place like not a car dealership so much, but like a car repair shop. I like referrals. What an important referral, right? From the cupbearer saying, oh yeah, I know a guy who interpreted my dream. So we'll see that in chapter 41, verse 9. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh saying, I would make mention today of my own offenses. Pharaoh was furious with his servants. This is him speaking about himself. Pharaoh was furious with his servants, and he put me in the confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguards, both me and the chief baker. We had a dream on the same night. He and I, each of us, dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. Now a Hebrew youth was with us there, servant of the captain of the bodyguard, and we related them to him, and he interpreted our dreams to us. To each one he interpreted according to his own dream. And just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me in my office, but he hanged him. And this is him sharing his testimony of his experience with Joseph. A whole other thing that we could go off on, but sharing his experience, something we all should do, sharing our testimony of Christ. But he shares his testimony of the things that he witnessed with Pharaoh. And through his testimony, he preserved an entire nation. And so, again, a whole lot that we could say if we want to relate stories, how important it is that we relate and share, because we don't know not only whom might be listening. We want to be share our testimonies, be a good witness, spread the light of Christ. And who knows that an entire family, an entire people might come through your faithfulness and the light, you sharing the things you've seen. But this cupbearer, it's all we know about him. And again, I don't know what he is in glory. I know what he is in the story. It's a vessel of God. Speaking of vessels, he was a vessel for God to use. God gave him a dream. God blessed his life, and God used him to reveal Joseph and Joseph's God to Pharaoh. And through this, Joseph was elevated. I was going to read it. We'll just move past it. Verses 38 through 41. Verse 41, Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. And Joseph finds so much favor for his interpretation that he's placed the right-hand man to Pharaoh. And from this, Joseph, and we know the story about his brothers coming because they're needing food. And then Joseph finds out about his brothers and he has them come before him. Eventually, he brings his family into the land of Goshen, and they procreate, and for decades and decades, they build up into this mighty nation. All because of Joseph's faithfulness. Certainly, we know his name. Probably easily a top 10 name in the Bible as far as names that first jump out about. testimonies and great men of God. But man, we don't know his name, was a crucial part in this as well. Wasn't the one doing the interpreting, but God used him to bring an awareness to Pharaoh, which, again, we know the result of this. God being able to do great things with people. And it has to be a testimony. One was forgiven, one was put to death. Anyways, there's so much to say on that story, but that's a whole nother sermon for another time. Let's look at another story, a little bit shorter. Exodus chapter 2. Similar though. Similar, we'll just read a few verses. And we're out of time. I don't really want to jump into the widows, because there's at least 3 I want to read. And wanted to get through this because I thought it would work. Maybe it's just fine that we cut it short. Gentiles, so this will be the week of Gentiles. Maybe next week is the afflicted, the widows, and the lepers. But let's read about Pharaoh's daughter. We don't know her name. Exodus 2, verse 5. She's not named, at least here. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to the bathe at the Nile with her maiden, walking alongside the Nile. She saw a basket among the reeds and sent her maid, and she brought it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the boy was crying. And she had pity on him and said, "This is the one of the Hebrew children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Moses' sister, I love this, it's so great, this story. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go ahead." So the girl went and called the child's mother. So then Moses' mom ends up being her wet nurse, his wet nurse. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." Then she was paid for it. So the woman took the child and nursed him. Here's the thing, because it's just Pharaoh's daughter. And you would think, who is she? God used her this day. And it couldn't have been anyone else. It's like it could have been no one else to do what she did. It was on her, and God used her. And so again, regardless of where she stands with God today, this right here sings to a vessel that God was able to use, and that changed the future of all of the Hebrews that were slaves in Egypt. As Moses drifted down, she saw the basket, she opened it up, and instead of reporting it to her dad, instead of being cruel, she had compassion on the baby, and she decided to take the baby to be her own. What a story. Verse 10, the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she named him Moses and said, "Because I drew him out of the water." We talked about that. So that's what Moses means, drew out, drawn out. And because he was drawn out of water. But Pharaoh's daughter, we don't know her name. But because of her and her compassion, she drew out a baby that could have been and would have been put to death by just about anyone else. And that's the thing. He had to grow up in Pharaoh's house. But what other Egyptian would have dared hiding this from the Pharaoh? Nobody, except for his daughter. It'd have to be a daughter to do something so gutsy that she knew her father, if she got caught, he would just get mad and probably kill the baby. But she did still, in faith and in compassion, she did the one thing no one else in the land could do. And to that we say, God's amazing, but we have to at least acknowledge that God used her. And it could have been no one else. And so he was raised in Pharaoh's house for 40 years. And all that he learned in that house and how to lead, of course, then 40 years being humbled in the wilderness, but the importance that played in Pharaoh and Moses' life, to be raised up in Pharaoh's house for 40 years, all because a woman who could have had any baby she wanted chose the Hebrew baby out of the Nile and took him in to be her own. And because of that, Moses, at the age of 80, we talked about this, at the age of 80, we talked about this yet Sunday or the week, leads Egypt out of slavery through the waters of the Red Sea, and ultimately leads them to the land of promise. And you say his story begins, well, with the faith of his parents, but, as a baby with this kind act of Pharaoh's daughter. And so We don't know her name. Maybe we could find it in history books. I don't know, but we know her by her works. And that's the point I wanted to make. Whether they're faithful or not, we are known by our works. And in the Bible, they're known by their works. And I think in heaven, we're known by our works. And, it doesn't really matter what our name is. What matters is the fruit we bear. So we'll talk more about this moving forward. Let's go ahead and stand. And any last words, anything else on your hearts? All right, if we're all set. Rick, will you dismiss us in prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, we come before you, forgiveness where we failed you. Thank you for each and everyone that's here to stay, especially asking you with those that are unable to make it, that you just bring them back to church in this needed time. We ask you to be with those that are away from us, just bring them back safely. Vacation, and those that are out of the state, dear Lord. We ask and pray you would be with our sister churches this evening, and we thank you so much for the prayers that you have answered. We put other petitions for you, have the work be done in them. Thank you for the days that you have given us, dear Lord. We ask and pray that you be guide and direct us. Give us the opportunity to show forth you to others as the right of this week. We ask this in your son's name.
Amen.